We all know the story, right? The guy who picks up a guitar and just effortlessly shreds, or the mogul with the absolute golden touch for making millions. It's a really comfortable narrative to tell ourselves, mostly because it lets the rest of us off the hook. But what if the whole wall we've built around the concept of genius is completely fake? What if the titans of history, the men and women who achieve the highest levels of power, influence, and craft, aren't actually superhuman at all? What if they simply followed a specific, primal process that literally any of us can tap into?
So I want you to really think about this question. What if genius isn't born, but built over time? Society constantly pushes this narrative that success is just a genetic lottery or the product of immense privilege. But history tells a completely different, much grittier story. True mastery is the result of intense effort, profound connection to your field, and ruthless discipline over a long period. It is a biological potential sitting dormant inside your brain right now, just waiting to be built.
In this explainer, we're decoding Robert Greene's incredible book, Mastery. And honestly, I was absolutely blown away to discover that historical heavyweights, from Charles Darwin to modern masters, all operate on the exact same internal operating system. And to figure out how to install that system for ourselves, we actually have to take a quick trip back in time to where it was first forged.
Millions of years ago on the ancient savannah, our ancestors were the ultimate underdogs. I mean, they didn't have armor, fangs, or crazy speed. To survive, they had to stand upright, which gave them a powerful visual focus to spot predators on the horizon. Over millions of years, they had to rely on extreme, tactical observation and deep social cohesion. By the time our brains reached their modern size, that survival mechanism had evolved into literally the most dangerous weapon in nature, the human brain, built to detach, focus, and entirely outthink its environment. Neuroscientists call the hardware behind this mirror neurons. It's how early human hunters didn't just track an animal, they quite literally got inside its head to anticipate its next move. When they chipped a stone spearhead, they felt that stone as a physical extension of their own arm. That primal hunter-like focus, that ability to deeply connect with the environment, that is the ancient biological root of what we now call mastery.
So how do we actually awaken that ancient hunter's focus in the modern world? Well, we walk the exact same three-phase path the masters walked. It's a universal narrative arc. You start as an outsider in the apprenticeship, you move to the inside in the creative active phase, and finally you achieve the intuitive command of true mastery. Let's break down exactly how you navigate that very first step.
Phase 1. The ideal apprenticeship.
When you enter a new career, you are essentially walking into the jungle. You don't know the rules, you don't know the power dynamics, and you definitely don't know who the predators are. Your only goal here is to absorb information. Just look at Charles Darwin. Long before he ever published a single theory, he spent years just quietly observing nature in passive mode. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. In your career, you have to do the exact same thing. Keep your head down, mute your colors, and tactically study how the top players operate before you ever try to leave your mark.
You see, amateurs only look at the what, the shiny exterior of a building or a super polished final product. But true apprentices get obsessed with the how. It's kind of like popping the hood of a car to understand how the engine actually fires. The legendary architect Santiago Calatrava didn't just study pretty buildings. He obsessed over raw anatomy and how structural bones fit together. You've got to understand the hidden mechanics of your industry to beat it. When you do, you stop being just a consumer and start becoming a creator.
Navigating social intelligence.
Now, you can have all the technical skills in the world, but if you can't read people, you are dead in the water. A young Benjamin Franklin learned this the hard way. The guy was brilliant for sure, but his intellectual arrogance constantly made him a target and created a ton of enemies. To survive, he had to drop what Greene calls the naive perspective, which is basically the childish belief that people are always going to act rationally. He stopped projecting his own ego and started treating human nature like a tactical science, genuinely observing what motivated people so he could disarm their resistance.
Because the truth is, in any workplace, you're going to face what Greene calls the 7 deadly realities, things like envy, passive aggression, rigidity, and so on. People aren't angels, right? Under the pressure of survival, they get nasty. An amateur fights them, gets dragged into the mud, and completely drains their energy. But a master, they spot these traits instantly, sidestep the drama, and let their undisputed results tell their story. You speak through your execution, not through petty workplace politics.
Phase 2. The creative active.
All right, once you've internalized the rules and hardwired the skills into your nervous system, it's time to break out of that apprentice mold and go on the offensive. You must find your unique life's task. Take Marcel Proust as an example.
He felt like a total failure trying to write conventional books, but when he finally used his own bizarre life narrative, his failures, and his ruthless, obsessive observations of high society as his raw material, his creative energy just exploded. Your work has to be deeply personal. If you're just doing it for a paycheck, the work is going to have no soul.
But here's the catch. As you start winning and experimenting, you face entirely new enemies, mainly complacency and ego. It is incredibly easy to get a little taste of success and suddenly get soft. You find a formula that works, you get conservative, or maybe you get addicted to the applause of the crowd. The absolute biggest threat to a master in the creative active phase isn't losing their talent, it's losing their emotional control. You have got to stay as hungry and flexible as you were on day one.
To keep evolving, you have to upgrade your brain from a conventional mind to a dimensional mind. A conventional mind sees a weird problem in the data, gets frustrated, and ignores it because it doesn't fit the rules. A dimensional mind sees that exact same anomaly and says, yep, that's the thread I need to pull. You have to build the mental toughness to sit in the unknown, what poets call negative capability, without panicking and just reaching for a cheap, cliché answer.
Phase 3. Achieving True Mastery.
We've reached the apex of human potential, but it demands a heavy toll. Roughly 20,000 hours of relentless, high-focus practice. And guys, this isn't just about punching a clock. It's about a deep immersion that literally rewires your brain's biology. When you finally cross that 20,000-hour threshold, you stop thinking mechanically through every single step. The tool of your trade, whether that's a massive spreadsheet, a piano, or a surgical scalpel, becomes an actual physical extension of your body.
At this elite level, you tap into what's called the dynamic, the living, breathing pulse of your field. A chess grandmaster doesn't just calculate moves anymore. They literally feel the psychological weight of the entire board. A master negotiator smells the fear in a room before anyone even speaks a word. You develop a tactical sixth sense for how all the moving parts connect and evolve from the inside out. Look at pilot Cesar Rodriguez. Flying in the Gulf War, he ended up in a brutal, life-or-death circular dogfight with an enemy MiG. At 600 miles an hour, your conscious brain is simply way too slow to calculate the odds. But because Rodriguez had ruthlessly studied and put in those thousands of hours, his intuition took the stick. He possessed a fingertip feel. That multi-million-dollar jet was just an extension of his own nervous system, allowing him to make split-second lethal decisions on pure instinct.
But hey, mastery isn't just for the battlefield. Daniel Everett achieved it deep in the Amazon. He didn't study the Purahad tribe from the safety of a university desk. He threw away his academic armor, his predefined narrative, and completely submitted to their reality. He hunted with them and learned to feel the jungle exactly as they did. By achieving this inside-out perspective, he made groundbreaking linguistic discoveries that completely shattered decades of safe, established academic dogma.
This quote by Goethe perfectly nails it. Everyone holds his fortune in his own hands, like a sculptor, the raw material he will fashion into a figure. That raw material is sitting inside your skull right now. What separates the masters from the amateurs isn't magical genetics. It's the grit to endure the brutal boredom of the apprenticeship, the emotional traps of success, and the sheer volume of hours required to reach the peak.
By following this primal path to the absolute end, we push our minds to the outer limits. You take that ancient hunter-gatherer hardware, built for lethal focus and deep social observation, and you aim it directly at your modern career. You fuse the cold, rational mechanics of your daily work with the deep animal intuition that only comes from relentless immersion.
The evolutionary path is laid out right in front of you. So what are you going to do with the time you have left? Will you settle for just skimming the surface, drained by the petty drama of the naive perspective? Or will you embrace the grind, put in your 20,000 hours, and finally step inside the machinery of true mastery to write your own ultimate narrative? The choice is entirely yours.